Welcome everybody. This is a really big experiment for us because we're doing a hybrid event today. And can I ask everybody in the rest of the room to be silent, please? Silence. Yeah, so a combination of a restaurant and a place to have a talk is a little bit difficult. It's a Zoom. We're doing Zoom, and we are also doing live. So it's quite complicated. There are people watching, as you can see, from other places, which is quite nice. And we'd like to welcome all those people who are listening from other places. And we also have our live audience. So it's a complicated setup. So please excuse us if there's any glitches or anything that goes on. And our wonderful techie, Stevan, well, hopefully, and our wonderful Zoom commander, Richard, will hopefully get us through the afternoon without too many problems. So our first talk today is a talk by Teddie Hwang, which is kind of following on the concert that she gave last night. So I hope many of you were at that concert, but if not, you're going to get a lovely taste of the way she thinks about music and about the night sky and how they relate to each other for her. And it's absolutely beautiful. So I'd just like to welcome Teddie.
Thank you, everyone. Okay, so hello and thank you for joining us today. My name is Teddie Hwang. I'm a historical flutist based in Germany, and I'm very excited today to be presenting with Georgia MacMillan from Mayo Dark Skies, and we're going to talk about how music, photography, and the dark sky movement have inspiring connections with each other. And that may seem kind of unlikely, but for those of you who were at my concert last night, you got a glimpse of how these connections can actually exist. We are both members of the International Dark Sky Society, and Georgia is also coming from Mayo Dark Skies, which we'll talk about later. And we're really grateful that Galway Early Music provided the perfect platform for us to talk to you all. So here's our sincere thanks from both Georgia and myself. Each of us will present for about 20 minutes, and then there will be time afterwards for a Q&A session. So now I need my PowerPoint presentation, and that's fine. So I'm a flutist specializing in historical performance, and I'm also a photographer specializing in portraiture for musicians. And as both a musician and a photographer, I've come to realize that the parallels between the two disciplines can offer much wisdom to each other. I'm assuming that most of you are music lovers or have something to do with music, so I'll be talking from the perspective of how the principles of fine art photography can help people gain insight into music. I've used these parallels to educate musicians in workshops and lecture settings so that they can incorporate more consciously the concepts of imagery and visualization into their performance and take their playing to the next level. We don't want that. Why is this slide not working?
Yeah, let me see if I can hide this at least. Yes. Okay. That one doesn't go away. Almost.
Well, okay, yeah, that's fine. Okay, and now, okay. Okay, so in music, we work with sound, and in photography, we work with light. As musicians, we shape sound through a variety of ways. And so imagine if you had to play the same 4 notes there 4 times with the same rhythm. Let me ask you here, what are ways that we can make that note sound different each time? Feel free to jump in. Go ahead. Okay, so making a note short or longer with articulation. What are some other ways? Loud and soft, right? Dynamics, right? So things like dynamics, articulation, or changing the type of sound, maybe for some instruments or singers using vibrato. These are ways that we can make a note sound different each time. And in photography, we use different qualities of light to convey a certain mood or expression. So when I'm designing a photo shoot, one of the most important aspects I'm thinking about is the quality of light, quality or kind of light to be used in the composition, depending on the character or mood that I want to achieve. So for example, do we want to have a direct lighting and create contrasty shadows? Or do we want light that's kind of more generous and less contrasty and really wrapping around the subject? Do we want to shoot in a dark location and kind of what kind of mood does that implicate? Or a bright one? And so you can see that with the different qualities of light, an image will then convey a different expression. And I find a photo composition is most successful when the light is in line with the story of the image. When you find an image particularly eye-catching, chances are it's because of the light and not necessarily the subject itself, but the light that is telling you something important. So whether it's a mood, highlighting the form of a subject, highlighting texture, or inviting the viewer into a particular space. There is also so-called flat light, which is a photographic expression for even lighting that's just coming straight on. There's light everywhere, and it's not very directional, as we would say. And while under this light, you can see everything, we generally lose a sense of depth in an image. And we can compare flat lighting with playing music kind of in a neutral way. So basically not much contrast in volume, in articulation, and so forth. And although sometimes that can be a useful expression to use, that's not generally the way we want to perform. So music lovers, tell me why. Because it's boring. That's right. So when we compare these two images side by side, one sees how obviously on the right side, we get a much more three-dimensional feeling of the castle. And perhaps it also creates much more of a mood in the composition. And this is really achieved through lighting. Okay, can you come on?
All right.
Okay. But don't get me wrong though, I'm not saying flat lighting is always a bad thing. It's just about, no, can you help me here? Oh, there we go. Yeah. Oh, how did you do? Okay. It's just about choosing an expression and using the right tools to make that happen. So you see here, it's the same lady, and I choose two very different types of lighting. One is just kind of like a flat light where it's all just light everywhere. And here you have more contrasting shadows and automatically creates a very different expression. So one sees that light is the absolute basis of photography, just like sound is the absolute basis of music. And the ongoing process in each of these disciplines is learning how to handle such an intangible medium like light or sound. And I encourage musicians to really make all musical decisions a conscious one and look out for opportunities to create light and shadow with one sound, whether it's in dynamics, sound color, articulation, and so forth. And speaking of light and shadow, I'm certainly not the first one to talk about that in music. I'd like to share two quotes by Johann Joachim Kranz. He was a court composer and the flute teacher of Frederick the Great, the King of Prussia, and wrote a very important book entitled On Playing the Flute. And the book is actually much more than just about how to play the flute and is an important source of information regarding musical aesthetics of the 18th century. So he writes, no less must good execution be varied, and light and shadow must be constantly maintained. And no listener will be particularly moved by someone who always produces his notes with the same force or weakness and plays in the same color and so forth. And he even goes on further by saying, Each note, whether a quarter, eighth, or 16th, should have its own piano and forte to the extent that time permits. Another fascinating concept in photography, which can be applied to music, is the use of negative space. Now, negative space is the space between, within, and around objects. By focusing on the negative space, we are also focusing on the tension between objects. So for example, in this image, I really shifted my focus on the space between the two viola da gambas and not on the instrument themselves. And on this image, I wanted to capture how the music flowed from the end of the flute and how the sound kind of emanated throughout the space. In music, the obvious places equivalent to negative space are rests, and rests hold tension and never mean that nothing happens there. Negative space in music can also refer to the space between the notes, which means for us musicians, we need to be thinking about exactly how to move from one single note to the next and how to sustain a feeling of tension which links notes and phrases all together throughout the entire composition. And again, I don't claim any new ideas here. As Debussy also said once, music is the space between the notes. So far we've talked about the concepts of light and shadow and of negative space and how that can be related in music and photography. We can also draw more music and photography connections specifically from the genre of nightscape or astrophotography. We'll start with the obvious connection, which is the experience of light and dark. So when we first go out at night, our eyes need time to get adjusted to the darkness. And in fact, it can be kind of uncomfortable at first if you're not used to it, as it may feel like that the darkness is kind of closing in on you. But I also experienced that once I get over this adjustment period, it's as if the darkness opens up again and then light literally unfolds around me. It's really one of the amazing and inspirational experiences that the night sky gives us. And I use this photo as an example to educate musicians on how it's important to always stay curious about the music we're playing, to literally discover the light in passages that may not seem obvious at first. So here you can see how there's many details that exist in a composition, both in the light as well as in the shadow areas. All details matter, obviously, and part of the fun in studying a piece of music is discovering those details and bringing them out in performance. So in night photography, we also use the technique of long exposure. And long exposure is also parallel to the idea of learning a piece of music over time. So just a quick explanation about long exposure. When we take a photo in a normal daylight condition, the exposure time, which means how long the camera lens is open to capture the image, to collect the light, is usually something like one couple hundredth or even couple thousandth of a second, okay? So really a short split of a second. In astrophotography, we often use at least a couple of full seconds, so anywhere from 10, 20, 30 seconds or more. With deep sky objects like galaxies and nebulae, you can expose for hours, months, or even years, not all at once, of course, but it can take a really long time. And with a camera, we are able to specify this time period, but not with our physical eyes, as our brains immediately interprets the information which the brain gathers from the eyes. So for those of you who were at my concert last night, maybe you were wondering, oh, but I never see the night sky like that, or I never see the Milky Way so bright. Well, one of the reasons is most likely light pollution, which Georgia will be talking about later. And another reason is, yes, camera technology functions differently than our own body's technology. You can see here, just barely visible. I have two different exposures done, one at 15 seconds on the left and at 20 seconds. And one can just faintly see a slight difference in the 20 seconds where the Milky Way is a bit more, is a bit brighter, and you see a little bit more detail in the object. And just like how long exposure allows us to see beyond our physical limitations, musical interpretation is about understanding beyond the visible written notation. So the notes we see on the page isn't music itself, and notation is really just a rough indication of how the music should basically go. To fully understand a piece of music takes time and practice. So for example, this is the Allemande from Johann Sebastian Bach from his partita in A minor for solo flute. If I were to just play the music as it appears on the page, as you hear here, it would probably sound very boring, as you see all these black notes and they all seem to look the same, and there are no indications of, dynamics or articulation or where to phrase and so forth. But if I were to write in everything I would do in actual performance of the piece, it would look like this. So, of course, Bach didn't mean that the music should be played in a boring way, but the common practice was that composers expected professional musicians to understand musical style and aesthetics, and so it wasn't necessary for them to notate everything. In this way, they also left a certain freedom for the performers, and the ultimate guidance was that musical decisions should be made based on good taste. So by taking time and digging deep into the music, what it finally sounds like will be very different than how it looks on the page. And studying baroque or early music is actually a great way to practice the concepts of light and shadow, negative space, and long exposure, since we have otherwise so little indication from the composer. And with the help of historical modern resources, we can then combine all these concepts to carve out shapes and lines to create light and shadow with our sound, so that the music is no longer just kind of a mass of notes, but rather this amazing landscape with a constant changing scenery and atmosphere. So just as an example, I'd like to share a film which I produced using the Bach Allemande as my foundation and incorporating my photography to highlight certain compositional elements in the piece. Besides seeing what the images apply, see if you can also hear the concepts of light and dark and hear how the musical notes get transformed into something much greater. Okay, so I hope this will work. Takes about 3 minutes. Another thing I like to mention in relation to experiencing the night sky and doing astrophotography is surrendering yourself to the elements, which is an act of humbleness and also a key quality for a musician. You see, a photo shoot is actually very much like a concert. You study and prepare for the event, and then you show up at a specific time to do the work. But sometimes things don't always go as planned. And so you have to be resourceful on the spot to react to various situations. And this is what happened to me here, where the camera shutter got released by accident while I was adjusting the camera angle. And not wanting to waste the shot, I decided to just wait and let the camera do its thing for about, I think it was 20 seconds I was exposing here. And once I saw the photo on my monitor at home, I was surprised to see how it absolutely conveys how I was feeling at that moment on the mountain, as if I were a bird flying in awe through this amazing starry sky and landscape. So here you have an image with a personal story to it. And this is just like how I tell musicians that the next time you play a wrong note, turn it into a stylish ornament and own it. This is an image I did on February 26 in the Black Forest in Germany. You may recall that February 26 was the start of the war in the Ukraine. I named this composition Path to Peace, and the photo shoot actually turned out to be had a much deeper meaning for me than just kind of a time to create this image. So I decided to make this a project for myself and dedicate this as a personal fundraiser project. Today you'll have the opportunity to help me with my fundraiser, and that there are prints of Path to Peace available for 50 euros, and 50% of that purchase will go to the Ukrainian Red Cross Society to help those who are affected by the war. I really hope that the image provides you with the same solace that I was be able to experience that night making the image. And so with this, I'd like to end my presentation, my part of the presentation here, and invite Georgia into the conversation to talk further about our night sky heritage. Are there any quick questions? Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for having me. Thank you firstly to Teddie for inviting me to collaborate, and to Maura for hosting, Esteban for a bit of technical support. So I'm delighted to be here at the Early Music Festival in Galway. My name is Georgia MacMillan. I'm here really through a research project with the Irish Research Council. So it's about dark skies in Ireland and our connection with the community and the night sky. Now, let me just test it. So we're going to talk a little bit about Ireland's dark sky movement. I'm based up in Mayo near Waldnafen National Park, which is also incidentally Ireland's first dark sky park called Mayo Dark Sky Park. I'd like to look at a little bit of light pollution and why we have these campaigns happening in Ireland, some of the cultural values, touching a little bit on an extension of what Teddie has already been speaking about, maybe moving a little bit more into the biodiversity and the human connection of and issues of light pollution, and how we can restore the night very simply, actually. So hopefully we can look at that. So first of all, Ireland has a dark sky movement. We have an organisation now called Dark Sky Ireland here. We have 3 international dark sky places on the island of Ireland. We have Kerry International Dark Sky Reserve, which has a gold tier since 2014. We have Mayo International Dark Sky Park with a gold tier since 2016. And we have more recently Ohm Dark Sky Park in Northern Ireland, which is on the site of Dava Forest Park. So as you can see in the image here, it's not, I suppose, unsurprising that the dark sky places are where they are, given the map, the aerial photography of light pollution. But I suppose it's fair to point out that that image was taken, it's a NASA image, a satellite image, was taken a number of years ago. So things have changed even since then, which we'll have a quick look at. And I suppose firstly, before we go any further, to say what are dark sky places? So there's an organization, it's kind of like a UNESCO type of organization. It's called the International Dark Sky Association, which Teddie and I are both delegate members of. And dark sky places, they have to be more than just dark. They have to be measured, they have to go through a screening process. But some of the key points I've highlighted there are that they have to have natural darkness that is valued as an important educational, cultural and scientific natural resource. So yes, we do have them in Ireland. We have, as I say, 3 of them. And more than that in terms of really dark places. So there's 3 accredited, but there are lots of other opportunities for places around the country, including very close to us here, Connemara. So what I'm showing you here is a map of the level of light pollution as it was in 1997. So as you might expect, the areas closer to the cities and the urban areas are brighter. So where the scale goes to the white level, that's at a scale of 10 times the natural sky brightness, 10 times the level that a sky should be. Some of the key points for that is that those people living in that area cannot see the Milky Way at all, and that their lighting is so bright that they have, certainly around the horizon, a lot of high levels of light pollution. So that's back in 1997. So we'll fast forward a little bit now. So this is 2015. So as you can see, there's a rapid spread of lighting, and it's not just through roads and a bit of development. It's also to do with the type of light that we're using. We have moved into the LED era, which largely uses the bluer end of the lighting spectrum, which scatters more into our atmosphere, making it even more bright than it should be. And the key thing here is that now we have people in the pink that have no Milky Way in their zenith, which is overhead. And we also have people living in the white areas that have no dark adaptation ever at night. So they're constantly living in skies that are polluted. So it's almost like a 24-hour daylight condition. We're evolved to use night adaptation at night when we go with our eyes. So the fact that we can't do that in some areas is an issue. When we look back into the past, there's a concept called archaeoastronomy. And you'd probably all be familiar with Newgrange and stone circles and alignments. So we know that our ancestors looked into the sky and saw connections. So whether it was for the seasonal planting or for ceremonial reasons, there's lots of examples of our night sky connection. And we're kind of losing that. So we're just trying to have a look at that again. Dr. Frank Prendergast has done some wonderful work on archaeoastronomy, including, you may have seen, there was a wonderful YouTube broadcast in the last 2 years during COVID, where he broadcast from Newgrange on the winter solstice. So you could see that shaft of light coming in. Are we okay there? So we're just about to move on. So that's our image about ancestors and our night sky in the archaeoastronomy. I'm going to move fairly quickly through some of these slides. So they're just to give you, I suppose, the various facets that dark skies relates to. It's not all about astronomy, but we have other cultural connections. What I've put in the presentation here is taken from a program called Stellarium, which is actually free to download. It's an astronomy-based software that you can download. I'll give a plug to Mayo darkskypark.ie. You can get a free copy of it that way. And what it does is that you put in your own location and you put the date in, and you can see what should be in the night sky. So if you're learning astronomy, it's really, really cool from that point of view. So the important thing here is you can go back in time, and we can look at some of the stars that you would be able to see from Galway City, let's say in the 1700s. So we've backtracked here. So we can see very clearly the plough. We can see a bit of the Milky Way. And we can see some of the key constellations, Cassiopeia there on the right in the Milky Way. It's probably not as, let's say, as good a depiction as we would like it to do, but it's a screenshot. So, but what is important is if we fast forward a little bit, you can see with light pollution, the growth in the city has changed dramatically. I have got a bit of a hue on there just to give you an example of the light glow, but we can hardly see anything other than the main constellations at night. And that's looking in a northerly direction. This is going back again to the 1700s in the southerly direction. Again, this would be city-based. So urban areas have changed rapidly, but only a few hundred years ago, our ancestors would have seen very impressive night skies, even from a city location. And fast forwarding, you'd see virtually nothing by comparison. So I'm going to, so my screen's jumping a little bit. I'm going to just move that into the context of our dark sky park up in Mayo. So for anyone that already knows the area, you can see Clew Bay there in the middle. You can see Westport and Castlebar, the urban areas, Ballinarp in the top. And then the black outline is where our dark sky park is. So it is pretty good from the point of view of seeing the night sky. But light travels, as we know, the reason we can see the stars from such a distance is because light travels until you put a lid on it. And what's happening here down in the right-hand picture is light is reflecting off cloud, so it's exacerbated. And as we all know, we do tend to have a little bit of cloud in the west here from time to time. So any cloud will make light pollution several hundred times, in some cases worse, because it's just rebounding off the water vapor. So we're working with Mayo County Council, we're working with local communities to just try and mitigate the light pollution that comes from the surrounding areas that might creep into our dark sky park. We have to have one or two places of, let's say, sanctuary, so that we can go and reset at night. These are a couple of examples, and you've just heard Teddie's talk about astrophotography and how the camera captures a little bit more than our eye would see. But we have a couple of photos of near to Galway. We have a suburban area. These are provided by Ray Butler of NUI Galway. So we have a suburban sky, and then very similar time, what you can see in Connemara, so more rural. So it's a dramatic difference by just traveling a few miles. So the benefits of dark skies, as I said, that it's not just astronomy. We're moving into talking about sustainable tourism these days and extending our winter season, our shoulder seasons. For rural communities, that is especially important because we only have a very short window traditionally for tourism. But with dark skies, you can't really go stargazing on the 21st of June because it's so bright, it's so late, but you can do it in the winter season. So it's attracting a new audience for people to come to rural Ireland to see the night sky. And the other things, that biodiversity, I'll talk about in a second, human health and well-being, our own physiological connection, and science and astronomy, of course. Color of light and biodiversity. So one of the issues is that the bluer the light, the whiter the light, the more it has a trigger effect for us as a species, but also for other species in nature and wildlife. And what you can see here, what it's trying to show you is that insects are attracted to the brighter white, bluer light more so than they are, say, closer to amber or warm white. So if we can maybe shift the color, that would be one thing that would help. It would reduce our light scatter, and it would be better for nature and also for ourselves, because blue light means it's daytime, it's time to wake up, suppress melatonin, and get on with our bodily functions. So if we have blue light all night, as with the screen, it's not too good for us. This is another just example of the colors. The one on the left is what we're aiming for with our street lights, to try and get a warmer white rather than the blue. And to explain that to our communities, just to make it resonate with people, we've used the concept of hygge, the warm, cozy feeling. And I think that makes sense to people. We're attracted to fire, we're attracted to candlelight, so it's warm and welcoming, and the Irish equivalent of chole. So in our cultural connections, and Teddie's already touched on some of this, you know, what we when we have a dark sky, we can our imagination connects. We can make music, we can make art, and who knows, you know, would we have ever had Starry Night if Vincent van Gogh had lived in such a light polluted era as we have today? So it's the people of the future, the young people who don't have access to a dark sky anymore, that we may be depriving of future masterpieces. Our ancestors again, and stories in the night sky. We've all been to those lovely events, Halloween, the jack-o'-lanterns, the stories of the sky. Children of Lear, we've got when we look up into the sky and we can see Cygnus the swan. That evokes something that we can tell young people, and even, you know, ourselves in groups around the fireside. It's a nice connection just to bring us back to nature and to talk about the night and the night sky. And in literature, I've just put a couple of examples there. The poem on the right, I won't read it to you now, but it was something that was, we held an event in Ballycroy a few years ago, and it was a poem that came out as a result of that event from somebody just happened to visit that area, and he talked about the veil of wasted light, and from dusk till dawn across the ancient tracery of stars. It was just such beautiful language that came out just from one evening under the stars. And of course, the Irish poet John O'Donoghue has several beautiful pieces, but The Wound at the Side of the House being one, where he talks about moths and the attraction to white light, the neon dome. Had I the heavens embroidered cloths? It's all connected to the night. It's that, I suppose, how does it make you feel? So as a community, we've talked to a number of different groups, and if we were to say, what are the challenges? There's the other side of darkness, that people have that perhaps image through media, through film noir, through literature that has led us to the dark side. Our language, sometimes we refer to dark as perhaps the not so good versus light is heavenly. So there are connotations that we need to overcome, and we understand that, and we're not trying to say everywhere should be dark. It's just maybe just changing our light a little bit so we can be more appropriate. One of the challenges we had locally is that in Mayo, up in Ballycroy, it was one of the last communities to be electrified in Ireland, so until the sort of late 60s. So by suggesting that we're going dark, it's, you know, something that people have to think about. It's connected with perhaps economic progress to have light and electricity, and that's only fair. But I think with our project, it's also flipping it on its head to say that we have something that you cannot have in urban areas at the moment anyway, unless they radically change lighting policies. So these are a couple of ways that we've asked people to have a look at lighting, to aim. They're very simple measures: aim light down, change the color, think about the timing, how long your light is on for. Does it need to be on all night? And our street lights, incidentally, are one of the few countries in Europe where we don't have any part night lighting. They're on from dusk till dawn every night. So that's over 4,000 hours per year, which is about 6 months. That's a lot of electricity being used. And here we have a couple of examples of our church in Newport, where we're looking at removing the floodlights and changing it to that hygge feeling of downlighting and allowing the skylight from heaven to come down rather than being up into the sky. Okay, so our motto as Mayo Dark Skies is let's help children to name more stars in the sky than stars on the screen. So I think with that, I will end the presentation, and thank you for listening. And I might hand back to Teddie. She has a couple of little clips, I think, to put on. Or do we have questions? Q&A? Okay.
Film afterwards if there's time, but want to give you the opportunity to ask questions.
Yeah, I so camera. I'm not a big fan of light anyway. If I were God, it would be all darkness. And I remember going to Iceland a few years back in the winter, and I thought it was like being in heaven, 20 hours of darkness. But what I'm concerned, I think this is great. I never heard this before. But you know, all the talk now is all about climate action, the carbon footprint. now you're talking about, and everything's, I mean, even in religion, like stuff, you have a lot of difficulty trying to convince people that this is a good thing and positive, because usually when you think of, like you were saying last night, darkness, we always see it in sort of, so when you're dealing with people, do they agree with you? One of the most beautiful things that I ever experienced, I was studying in the Middle East a number of years ago, and I was sleeping on the desert. And, it says in the Bible, there's greater than stars in the sky. I couldn't believe it.
Awesome.
You think you could pull them off the sky. So I'm just curious, how, when you're dealing with others, I mean, do they think they agree with you, or do you have to really fight, or what do you say?
I would not be fighting with people, no. I mean, it's all
Well, I
about,
don't
it's a
mean that,
community.
yeah.
No, but we wouldn't be confrontational about it. I suppose that's what I'd be saying. So, yes, some people are a little bit concerned that we might be radical and we're like trying to turn every light off, and that's not the case. So I would like to be very reassuring about that, that we're working with the community. That lighting project you saw there in Newport is driven by the community. We are approaching the council. It's not the other way around. So we're trying to design our environment at night the way we as a community would like it. And I think that's important. It's giving the community their ownership on the lighting. Because, we have influence over other public ground spaces during the daytime. Why not at night? So a lot of it is just ignored, at nighttime. So I suppose to answer your question, that people do sometimes have concerns. A lot of it, though, is once people get out and actually see and value it themselves, then that has a change in opinion. We've
Because I
noticed
think
that
there's always talk about climate action, the world is going to be a disaster. And I don't think fear or facts are going to make a difference. You really try to get people to love the environment.
That's exactly
and I think because the ancients saw all these stories, I don't know, but I just think thanks.
It's one of also my reasons why I created the program, which you concert last night, to using music and art to move people. And I think people don't necessarily respond to facts and figures, but if they feel something inside them, that's when you actually have them and get them on board to understand why. It's not about numbers, it's about us, finally. Yeah. Any more questions?
Hi. So how does it work, say, when people go to visit the night sky experience? Obviously, it can be quite dependent, but people are brought out and guided.
in Mayo, there's different options. There is guides that will bring you out, or you can just go self-guided. It's like visiting the national park. You can either go on your own mat, or you can go to an event there. So we do have programmed events, and there are guides in the area as well. So.
So is it partially on private land, or is it on
No,
that's already
no,
part
all
of
of
the
our-
national park?
It's all national parks, so
It's already
all of our
national
national
park.
parks are state-owned land. So yeah.
Great, thank you.
Okay.
So if you go back to my presentation.
Sure, yeah. You know, if there are more questions in Zoom or something like that, so people wanted to ask. Yeah, okay. So I want to share as well. Yeah, I'm trying to get the file so that I can share it as well.
Yeah.
think we should explore.
First collaborations I did with Dark Sky, worked with an astrophotographer, Jeremy. He had time-lapse video of the comet before using the line. Here there are leaflets and information about skies.
Oh, right. So on the side here, there are pamphlets and information about Mayo Dark Skies. If you want to have a copy of Path to Peace, they're also available. Please don't make me take them back to Germany with me. It'd be great. Thank you.